It should have been impossible. Temperatures that could freeze rivers solid. Winds sharp enough to cut through layers of fur. No modern heaters, no double-paned windows, just bark, hides, and firelight. And yet, through centuries of brutal winters, Native American families slept safely inside longhouses. Their breath rising in soft clouds, their children warm, their lives intact. How did they do it? What secret did they know that let them thrive where others would have frozen in a single night? The secret wasn't magic, it was mastery. Every inch of those long wooden structures was built with purpose, precision, and generations of lived science. While European settlers huddled in drafty cabins and perished from the cold, indigenous engineers had already solved the problem of surviving winter without a single spark of electricity. It all began with the walls. To an outsider, thick bark panels might have looked rough or primitive. But to the people who built them, they were the key to life itself, living thermal batteries charged by firelight. During the day, the central hearth poured out heat that soaked into the bark, which stored warmth like coiled energy. When the flames died at night, the walls exhaled that stored heat back into the room, holding a stable temperature long after the fires went quiet. Those bark layers weren't random. Builders stacked them intentionally, one over another, trapping thin layers of air between them. And trapped air, invisible, weightless, was their greatest ally. Air barely conducts heat, meaning every pocket became a silent barrier between survival and frostbite. Each wall worked like 1,000 tiny blankets stitched together by nature. Some tribes used cedar bark, prized for its moisture resistance. Others used birch, flexible enough to survive the constant contraction and expansion of freezing nights and thawing days. The design was regional, but the principle was universal: adapt to the land and the land will protect you. This knowledge came not from books, but from centuries of observation, trial, and intuition sharpened by necessity. Inside, woven reed mats and animal hides lined the walls. What might look decorative to the untrained was actually insulation as advanced as anything in a modern home. The mats trapped warmth while still breathing enough to let smoke drift upward, creating an environment both comfortable and safe. Families could even adjust these layers seasonally, add more bark for severe winters, remove some as spring returned. The home changed with the weather, evolving as naturally as the people who lived inside it. But walls were only half the story. Beneath every sleeping family was another hidden marvel, bedding that looked simple yet worked with quiet genius. Dried grasses and cattail reeds formed thick mattresses that trapped heat while wicking away moisture. Every blade mattered. Too thick and it trapped dampness. Too thin, and the cold seeped through from the frozen earth below. Over that came hides, deer, elk, and buffalo, chosen not just for their warmth but for how they layered together. The first hide blocked ground chill. The next captured air pockets for insulation. The topmost reflected body heat back down, forming a cocoon of protection. It was nature's version of modern thermal layering, refined through generations of life and death winters. At night, a family's sleeping area became an ecosystem of warmth. The cattails and hides kept moisture away, the walls held radiant heat, and the people themselves added the final element: shared body warmth that multiplied like firelight spreading from ember to ember. Each person was part of the structure, part of the system, each breath feeding the balance between cold and life. Even in the dead of night, when snow pressed against the outer walls and icy winds screamed through the trees, those inside remained warm, wrapped in silence and the deep rhythm of breathing. The fires might fade, but the longhouse lived, holding its warmth like a heartbeat, waiting for dawn. Generations later, modern architects would marvel at the energy efficiency of these ancient structures. But to the people who built them, it was simply common sense. You didn't fight the cold, you learned its rhythm, redirected its power, and built a home that could breathe and live with you. The genius of native engineering was never about conquering nature. It was about understanding it so deeply that survival became effortless. And in those long frozen nights, surrounded by bark, fire, and family, warmth wasn't just heat, it was knowledge. When the winter moon hung high and the wind howled across the plains, there was one sound that brought peace instead of fear: the soft crackle of the longhouse fire. To the untrained eye it looked simple, a pit in the ground glowing with red coals. But this fire wasn't just a flame. It was the heartbeat of the home, the living engine that kept entire families alive through nights that could kill a man in hours. Building that fire took more than striking flint. It required understanding, an ancient science passed down from generation to generation. The people knew that fire, for all its warmth, was also dangerous. It could save or it could suffocate. A careless blaze could fill the longhouse with smoke and steal the very air from a sleeping child. So, firekeeping became an art, part chemistry, part intuition, part sacred duty. The central fire pit was never placed by chance. It sat in a precise position, calculated to heat the entire space evenly while staying clear of sleeping areas. The fire needed to breathe, but only just enough. Too little air and it would die. Too much and precious warmth would rush up through the vents, lost to the night sky. The builders had already solved this equation centuries before modern ventilation systems ever existed. Above the fire, the roof worked in harmony. Small openings, sometimes no larger than a hand, directed smoke upward and out. The draft pulled air through the structure in a perfect balance, drawing in cold oxygen at ground level while letting the smoke escape just fast enough to keep the air clean but the warmth trapped. On nights when winds changed direction, the family adjusted the vents using simple bark flaps or woven mats, fine-tuning airflow the way a musician tunes a drum. The smoke itself played an unexpected role. It didn't just escape, it lingered. A faint haze would gather beneath the ceiling, forming an invisible blanket that trapped heat from escaping too quickly. That thin layer of smoke acted like a thermal barrier, sealing warmth inside the living space below. Modern engineers call this passive heating. To native families, it was simply the way of the world. Then there was the ancient trick of banking the fire, a method that turned a pile of coals into an all-night heating system. Before sleep, the firekeeper would rake the glowing embers into a mound and carefully bury them under a layer of ash. The ash starved the fire of oxygen, forcing it to smolder slowly, releasing steady heat for up to 12 hours without open flame. By dawn, the embers could be revived with a single breath and a handful of dry grass. Different woods served different purposes. Hardwoods like oak and hickory burned long and steady, perfect for deep winter nights. Softer woods like pine or birch flared bright and fast, ideal for quick bursts of warmth during the day. Mixing them was an art form, an unspoken equation of timing and temperature that could only be learned through years of watching, tending, and feeling. Some longhouses even kept multiple fires, smaller ones spaced strategically down the length of the structure. Each family section had its own hearth, and each fire was connected through a rhythm of shared maintenance. Too much smoke in one area. A vent was opened. Cold air in another. A mat dropped lower to seal the draft. The whole house breathed like a living creature, inhaling, exhaling, balancing itself through the coldest months. But the fire's role went beyond heat. It was light, protection, and spirit. Around it, families gathered to cook, tell stories, and pass down survival knowledge in whispers and laughter. The fire was teacher and companion, a flickering presence that reminded them that warmth came from more than wood. It came from people. Even children learned the rules of the flame. Never blow too hard on coals. Never leave a fire untended. Always watch the color of the smoke. Thick and dark meant danger, light and thin meant safety. They grew up understanding fire as a friend that demanded respect. And when the snow outside grew deep and the wind roared like a living thing, the fire still burned. Sometimes small, sometimes fierce, but always alive. The red glow reached across the longhouse, painting the walls in gold, warming hides and hearts alike. It wasn't just a source of heat, it was a symbol of life itself. Long before chimneys and furnaces, before thermostats and insulation, native people had already mastered thermal balance. Their homes breathed. Their fires thought. Their walls remembered the warmth of yesterday to keep them alive tomorrow. In the silence between the gusts of wind, that quiet fire kept its promise, to guard, to warm, to endure. By midnight, when the fires had been banked and the world outside had turned into a frozen wasteland of silence, warmth still lingered beneath their feet. It came not from luck or chance, but from the ground itself, the final piece of an ancient system so efficient that even today, engineers would call it a masterpiece of passive heating. To the people who lived it, though, it wasn't technology. It was instinct. The earth was their ally, and they knew exactly how to make it breathe warmth back into their homes. Beneath the longhouse floors, the ground was alive with stored heat. Every day, the fires that burned in the center didn't just warm the air above, they fed energy downward. The dense earth absorbed it slowly, holding it like a massive clay battery, then releasing that energy through the coldest hours before dawn. It was a simple trick, but it worked with mathematical precision. Clay and packed soil were chosen not for convenience, but because they stored heat better than any organic material. The heavier the clay, the longer it held warmth. Even a single layer of it could radiate gentle heat for hours, keeping the chill of the frozen ground at bay. Families walking barefoot across the longhouse floor could feel the faint breath of warmth rising through the soil, the earth itself lending its strength to help them endure. Some families went further, creating small thermal pits near sleeping areas. They'd line shallow depressions in the ground with flat stones, heat them in the fire until they glowed red, then cover them with sand or clay. By the time the family lay down to sleep, the heat had diffused just enough to be safe, a soft, steady warmth that lasted through the night. It was nature's version of an electric mattress, except this one never broke, never needed cords, and was perfectly silent. The sand was key. It molded around the stones, holding them in place while capturing every ounce of thermal energy. As the night stretched on, it released that heat evenly, never too fast, never too hot. For a child lying close to one of those sand pits, it was like sleeping beside the sun. The choice of stones was no accident either. The people knew which rocks could handle heat, and which ones would explode without warning. Granite, basalt, and sandstone were prized. They heated evenly, cooled slowly, and never shattered under pressure. Limestone, though, that was dangerous. It trapped moisture deep inside, and one mistake could send shards flying across the room. The lesson was passed down carefully as sacred knowledge. The wrong rock could mean death. Even the earth's layout inside the longhouse was part of the plan. The ground was packed higher near the walls and lower toward the center, forming a shallow trough where warm air naturally pooled from the fires. Every design choice served a purpose: to control how air and heat moved, to make sure no space was wasted, no warmth lost. Above them, the roofs played their own role in this delicate symphony of survival. Thick layers of bark, reeds, and even snow formed a natural insulation barrier that trapped warmth while allowing just enough ventilation for smoke to escape. The snow in particular might seem like a burden, heavy and cold, but in truth it was an ally. Snow trapped air within its crystals, creating a blanket of still air that sealed heat inside the structure. A well-snowed roof meant a warmer night. The roof design itself followed rules refined over countless winters. Steep angles where snow needed to slide off. Gentler slopes where heat needed to be retained. And always at the center, the smoke hole, the ancient vent that acted as both chimney and thermostat. The family could adjust it by hand, pulling a flap open or closed depending on wind, temperature, and the behavior of the fire below. They didn't need thermometers or weather forecasts. They could read the color of smoke, the feel of air against their cheeks, the sound of the wind as it moved across the roof. Every small sign told them how to adjust the house, how to breathe with the world outside instead of fighting it. And when the storm outside reached its worst, when snow fell so thick that the world vanished into white, the longhouse stood steady, glowing with quiet warmth. Inside, the floor still breathed heat. The roof still held it. The smoke drifted upward in lazy spirals that caught the last flicker of firelight. It was a living machine built from earth and wood, powered by knowledge and care. The genius wasn't in any single invention. It was in the harmony. Fire, earth, air, and water all working together in perfect rhythm. Each night, the longhouse came alive as an organism built from nature itself. The cold might rage outside, but inside the world was calm, warm, and eternal. Even with perfect walls, steady fires, and a warm floor beneath them, survival in the dead of winter still came down to one final, brilliant secret: each other. Native American families didn't just live together. They survived together, using the warmth of their own bodies as part of the heating system. It wasn't only love or comfort that made them sleep close. It was science, though they would never have called it that. Long before anyone studied thermodynamics, they already understood how body heat worked. A single person sleeping alone could freeze in hours, no matter how thick their blanket. But 10 people packed close under shared hides and furs could create a microclimate, a pocket of living warmth that defied the worst storms nature could summon. At night, when the fires were banked low and snow piled against the walls, families gathered in tight circles on their bedding of cattails and hides. Children were placed in the center, where the air was warmest. Around them lay the mothers, the elders, and finally the strongest adults, forming a protective wall of heat and mass that kept the center alive through the long hours of darkness. They didn't just sleep, they wove themselves into one living furnace. Every breath mattered. As dozens of lungs exhaled warm air into the enclosed space, the temperature inside rose slightly, sometimes by 10 degrees or more. The rhythm of human breathing became part of the longhouse's heating system, adding another invisible layer of warmth. Some even synchronized their rest. When one side rolled, the other shifted, ensuring even heat distribution through the night. The family arrangement was no accident. Positioning was planned with the precision of an engineer. The most cold-resistant sleepers were placed near outer edges, where drafts could sneak through. Children, elders, and the sick, the most fragile, were always kept near the center, protected from the chill by layers of human and animal warmth. It was survival by strategy, perfected through centuries. And then there were the dogs. Loyal companions, guardians, and when temperatures dropped to deadly levels, living heaters. Thick-furred northern breeds curled up between people, especially beside children, sharing warmth while keeping watch. Their higher body temperature meant they radiated steady heat through the night, and their keen ears offered early warning if the wind changed or predators approached. A good dog could mean the difference between life and death on a night when the fire ran low. Even clothing became part of this shared system. Buffalo robes and fur-lined hides weren't worn randomly, they were layered with purpose. The softest furs stayed closest to skin, trapping air in tiny layers. Coarser hides on top sealed that warmth in, reflecting it back toward the group. Each layer worked like a thermal circuit, recapturing what would otherwise be lost to the night. Sometimes, when the cold grew unbearable, families rotated positions mid-sleep. The outer sleepers would move inward for a time, and the warmer center sleepers would take their place on the edge. It was an unspoken choreography, a quiet, half-conscious rotation that kept everyone alive until dawn. The young learned it by instinct, not instruction. It was part of the rhythm of life. Together they became their own heating network, not a home built around individuals, but a living organism where every person played a role. The fire gave warmth. The walls stored it. The floor held it. And the people together became the heart that made it all work. If you had walked into a longhouse on one of those nights, snow howling outside, frost thick on the bark walls, you wouldn't have seen suffering. You'd have seen a slow, steady glow. Faint orange light on sleeping faces. Steam rising with every exhale. A dog stirring near the edge of the hides. Silence, except for the low breathing of life enduring in the frozen dark. And when the dawn came, pale and cold and blue, smoke would rise again from the roof vent. The fire would wake. The walls would warm. The longhouse would breathe anew. The settlers who arrived centuries later couldn't understand it. How could these primitive people survive where their own froze to death? They never realized that what they called primitive was, in truth, perfect. The longhouse wasn't just a building, it was a body. The fire, the lungs. The people, the heart. The walls, the skin. Together they had built something far greater than shelter. They had built harmony with nature itself. And in that balance of fire, earth, air, and life, warmth was never just heat. It was family. It was wisdom. It was survival made beautiful.